Paul is all about offending you. He wants to make you boil.
Still 86% combat effective.
He will say something outrageous just because he knows that he will get a wild reaction back.
Sharon Stone claimed he tricked her without her knowing into the famous scene, Basic Instinct. First of all, of course it's a lie. Yeah.
Did Bobby Vasquez kill you?
Bitch, mostly, but he meant it affectionately.
Do you have any Coke?
I just love Coke with Jack Daniels. He gave me a lot of pleasure.
I love women.
Do you have qualms about doing it?
Not one, to tell you the truth. I realized that a lot of other actresses might have been scared of it, but for the reasons they were scared of it were the reasons that made me say I have to do this.
I grew up on a diet of VHS tapes that were extremely poorly translated. In the 90s, many people in Eastern Europe did not have access to official tapes. I would watch over and over again these horrible copies where you could hear the English in the background, and a half a second or a second later you would hear the translation, all done by one person. And this was basically my young life, but I never actually thought I would be one of the people making such things.
Verhoeven kind of belongs to that era of the video cassette. That's when his movies were made, and that's something about maybe why they were so special.
We were able to save the left arm.
What? I thought we agreed on total body prosthesis. Now lose the arm, okay?
One way you could describe Verhoeven's peak Hollywood. So this is peak effects, peak nudity, peak levels of violence. So whatever styles you associate with Hollywood films, they're all turned up to the max.
Please welcome back Paul Verhoeven.
Thank you.
You've referred to Robocop as the American Jesus.
Sure. Well, first of all, I mean, Old Testament, I meant when I read the script and studied the script, the scene that really seduced me and convinced me that I had to do this movie, even if it was in a different culture and language, etc., which is the scene when he comes to his house and basically and sees these images, there's like flashbacks about his former life, and for me that meant basically looking at Paradise Lost.
I think it was Ed Neumeier I think that he had spent some amount of time in corporate environments himself. One of the sources of the Ed 209 shooting everybody up in the boardroom came as a result of his own personal fantasies of somebody coming in and shooting up people sitting in the room. So I think
So that's yeah, I've had that fantasy, I think, was being in a meeting. Yeah.
What we think of as Verhoeven is actually a great amount of work by design leaders, the heads of department who helps him make his vision come true. ED209 is a really good example of that. If anybody knows anything about Phil Tippett, they know that he is very into philosophy and that he really thinks about the meaning of the stories that he works on. ED209 when you listen to it, when you both watch it and when you listen to it, there's so much there. I noticed the first about ED209 was the animal sounds, was the fact that it sounded like a very threatening large electronic animal. Mixed in with that as well, Tippett wanted the robot ED209 to sound like the Industrial Revolution, personifying the Industrial Revolution, to give it a shape, to give it a sound. That is what they did. And Verhoeven has gone on to say that he saw Tippett as a co-director. Verhoeven really likes stories within stories, so we have that in Robocop, which is the news broadcast, but also I'd buy that for $1, which is, I think, a comedy show. And then, of course, in Starship Troopers, you have that happening as well. And again, that's just what the film opens with telling you about what it means to be a citizen, and asking you if you'd like to know more. It's a lower resolution copy of what is happening in the wider world. So you end up with this kind of recursion. You have the film, and then you have the stories within the film, which they're always ersatz copies. They're always lower in the amount of information that they communicate. He's giving you a pattern that you have the film, you have an even smaller copy of something in the film. Therefore, you are, if you go in the other direction, you're coming back to our much richer reality. And I think that is crucial, because one thing that I've read about Verhoeven, he describes going to the cinema. When he came out after watching this film, he realized, oh wow, everybody is living their own different story. You are yourself living in a story. Function of his films, in my opinion, this is one of the most important ones, is to get you to ask, am I dreaming?
Recall!
What is it that is exactly the same about every single vacation you have ever taken? You're the same. No matter where you go, there you are. It's always the same old you. Let me suggest that you take a vacation from yourself, or we call it the ego trip.
The walls of reality will come crashing down. You'll even have fantasies about alien civilization. But you've got to want to return to reality.
Is it true that you actually had your audition or your final audition in a hotel suite, on a bed, with Arnold? No. Is that story not true?
Then it was put to me that Paul Verhoeven was going to be the director. And I said, well, whatever happens, I have to go meet this guy because I admire him so much. Also, there was a copy. You know, they send you a little two-liner about what the character is. Amazonian beauty. And I thought, well, at last I don't have to try to be petite. Suddenly I had this like sinking feeling. And I thought, oh, this is this horrible thing all over again, this horrible Hollywood conveyor belt. I just can't sit in the chair and do this. And I said, I just looked at him, I said, I'm sorry, I just can't do the audition. And he looked at me and said, well, what do you need? I said, well, you know, this character is so physical and there's no room in here. And he said, well, let's make some room. And he opened the door and he kicked the furniture out into the hall. And I said, I don't want to have to sit still. And he took the camera off the tripod. He said, let's go. I'd say, you know, the punchline isn't working. And he'd say, well, what do you want to have happen? I'd say, well, I feel like there should be a beat. I should deliver the punchline and people should laugh. And he said, well, what you need to do then is take a step to create the beat. So do that, turn around, take the step. So I did it. I turned around, I took the step. Sure enough, everybody in the room started to laugh. And I thought, this is the man I've been waiting for. Well, if you don't trust me, you can tie me up. Give you something to dream about.
One of the buttons that Verhoeven is pushing is just the Hollywood button. He understands that to be bankable, you have to have very good-looking people on screen. Great. So it's partly peak Hollywood, but partly I think it's creating a distance between the aggression and your experience. It's almost a kind of obfuscation. It adds to the Verhoeven ambiguity. It adds to the ambiguity of what you're watching.
What do you think?
We notice that Verhoeven's work is frequently misinterpreted, what its message is. And I think that the beauty is actually possibly the biggest confounding factor. That it makes no sense that something so bloody, so violent, it has such high levels of aesthetic beauty. I also think that Verhoeven just really loves beautiful people. I think he just loves them.
Why aren't these people subscribed to the science fiction channel?
I'm trying to neutralize a traitor, sir.
If they're dead, they can't hit like you, moron.
We can't let him run around. He knows too much.
Laurie says they don't know about the science fiction podcast.
That's now. In an hour, he could have total recall.
Listen to me. Subscribe to the science fiction podcast at damiangwalter.com for audio commentaries and interviews. Is that clear?
It's very hard to play a part like that and make it so smooth, right? And I think I did it so well that people thought, oh, she's just like that. Because I have such a symmetrical face, classically beautiful, it's really hard for people to give it to me that I'm good at things, right? Because you can't have this and have that too.
So we got 31 stab wounds. Or was it?
One of the things that I think Verhoeven says happens with women, that the more attractive they are, that the more they succeed in attracting people, the more likely they are to attract trouble of some other sort. This is quite funny, right? It's almost as if the men in his films a lot of the time can't even control themselves.
Gave me a lot of pleasure.
You like playing games?
Games are fun.
Women, a lot of the time, appear to get into trouble not due to what they do, but due to how they are. And I think this is actually, unfortunately, quite ironic, because given how Sharon Stone was impacted by the film. On the one hand, she became a superstar when she was fighting for custody for her child. The court decided that she was a less fit mother. Sharon Stone paid a price for being as magnetic as she was in the film. And the film is partly about what happens to women if they dare to be too attractive. So it happens fictionally, it happens in real life.
There's no smoking in this building, Miss Trammell.
What are you gonna do? Charge me with smoking? I had sex with him for about 1.5 years. I liked having sex with him. Johnny wasn't afraid to experiment. He wasn't afraid of experimenting. I like men like that. Men who give me pleasure. He gave me a lot of pleasure. He gave me a lot of pleasure.
You ever
engaged in sadomasochistic activities with him?
Exactly what did you have in mind, Mr. Corelli?
You ever tie him up?
No.
You never tied him up?
No. Johnny liked to use his hands too much. I like hands and fingers. I've always had a fondness for white silk scarves. They're good for all occasions. I have a fondness for white silk scarves. I have a very vivid imagination.
But you said you like men to use their hands.
No, I said I like Johnny to use his hands. No, I said I like Johnny to use his hands.
Did you kill Mr. Boz, Miss Trammell?
I'd have to be pretty stupid to write a book about killing somebody and then kill them the way I described it in the book. I'd be announcing myself as the killer. I'm not stupid. I'm not stupid. It's nice.
By being in Showgirls, whether it was a good movie or a bad movie, everybody was talking about you.
Showgirls and Elizabeth Burke. Right.
You have now,
total name recognition. Auditioning tomorrow morning. I think you should try out.
Showgirls was consistently considered to be the worst film ever made.
And that's the show. I don't care whether you live or die.
I remember watching it and being very confused. I couldn't understand where the bad was.
From the creators of Basic Instinct.
I came to see the bad, and the bad was not there.
To the edge. this time, they're taking you all the way.
So I just kept watching it every few years. I kept thinking, okay, I must have missed something.
You got more natural talent when you dance than anybody I've ever seen.
Clearly, there's something here that everybody sees lighting up.
She's gonna be in the show.
If someone gets in your way, step on them.
So I've been watching Showgirls every few years for about, 13 or 12 years or so. So that was my entry into Verhoeven.
She's dazzling, she's exciting, and she's what Las Vegas is all about. The passion is real. I can fall in love with you. The desire is intense.
You can't touch me, but I can touch you. I'd really love to touch you.
And the show
People who
is
gave it
about to begin.
negative reviews are obsessed with it.
Showgirls.
There's a meta-narrative around Showgirls. Elizabeth Berkley is the beautiful girl from a teen drama, and I think she's literally the homecoming queen. And he's going to cast her as the showgirl.
If you imagine Verhoeven's thinking of what he was trying to do, he was just doing the same thing he'd done before that. He was just turning up the dial. Before you would see dozens of people shot up with basically infinite bullets. You see bodies like they fly through the air and they're propelled by the bullets that are landing into them, right? And as violent and aggressive as that was, it wasn't really a big deal. It was just a question of age rating and maybe not so suitable for children. And all Verhoeven really did was he just did the same thing, but for a slightly different industry. Except, and here's where I think it gets really ugly. If you examine the film, the script it's not bad. It has like shades of All About Eve. It is a relatively straightforward story about a girl who comes to a town and wants to, dreams big and wants to make it to an important position. The cinematography was outstanding. Really beautiful makeup, great dialogue. The whole thing was as well made, really, as I think Total Recall was. And I think two things happened. Maybe one of them being that, first of all, by that point, something awful had happened to people culturally, to everyone, where nudity somehow became a dirty thing. After Playboy, after all these things where apparently, after the sexual revolution, after all these things happened, what emerged was not a healthy response to sex, but actually what appears to be a very dysfunctional one. And so in people's heads, having a naked body on the screen became a vulgar thing. And the other part is almost more sinister. And I'm wondering what you might have to say about this as a man. I think that one of the reasons that Verhoeven made this film is actually to point a finger specifically at not just the industry, but actually at men as well. The one scene that people come back to when they complain about Showgirls is the sex scene in the swimming pool. When they're having sex and people are like, lol, oh my god, that's so ridiculous. Yes, it is supposed to be ridiculous. That is literally the whole point. That you have this performative act, and yes, it is as ridiculous as it seems, of course. I think that a lot of men who saw this, they might have recognized themselves. I don't know if they did this consciously or unconsciously. I'm sure it was a mixture of both, but they didn't like it. And I think that's the other part of Showgirls. I think that it was guilt and shame, but it was also, I think, a conscious tanking by probably by a lot of men. And there's one moment which I come back to a lot when I was reading about people's responses to the film as it came out. I remember reading Kyle MacLachlan's reaction when he first saw it in the cinema. Kyle MacLachlan it's such a good casting decision because by that point, Kyle MacLachlan was basically a very good guy. He had not long ago been in Twin Peaks, he had been in Blue Velvet, he had been in all these films where there's like a wholesomeness to his face and his voice and the way he moves, all these things that you really want to like him. He's just remarkably likable. Now, I don't know what MacLachlan thought was happening as they were shooting the film. I really don't. But when he watched it, he describes his reaction of seeing the film on screen, and he says, I was watching it and I was horrified. what have we done? So I think Showgirls is an explosive film that actually did his job too well and somewhat ruined Elizabeth Berkley's life. But maybe that is also why it's such a good film now, right? This is my favorite Verhoeven. This is probably my top 3 films of all time. And it's such a pleasure to watch. And it is a pleasure to watch for so many reasons, but one of the main ones being how incredibly beautiful those women are on screen. And, you know, every time I watch it, I say thank you. Thank you for doing this for us.
I mean, it's really saying sexuality or sex in general is money. And basically is that's not only, you could say, perhaps an attack on Vegas, but it's perhaps was seen as an attack on the United States in general. The bottom line is money. I mean, some people think that is the truth about the United States.
People from all over the globe are joining up to fight for the future.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part. I'm doing my part.
A planet hostile collide. There's something.
Mobile infantry made me the man I am today. Fully automatic burrito.
Making a better tomorrow. Raccoons are dangerous.
Everyone fights, no one quits.
I'm very curious to know if there's any particular scenes that stay with you, because I can tell you mine. It happened relatively early on, which is, in fact, near the very beginning, when the graduation party's happening and they're having the dance. You see these sort of teenage thrills where people are jealous and they like each other and they want to compete, you know, but then after all that happens, the camera begins to go up. And another characteristic of Verhoeven films is that there's a lot of people. There's a lot of extras. There's so many extras. There's so many shots of lots of people. And here again, the camera is on the crane. It rises up. And you had been watching people dancing and all their rivalries, all these things playing out, just teenagers being teenagers. And the camera keeps going up. And you see that it wasn't just the one captain that Carmen fancied that was wearing his gray jacket, his uniform. But actually, there's lots of these people wearing their uniforms who are dancing along with these kids, right? Substantial number of people wearing these gray Nazi uniforms are just having a nice time. All they're doing is living their lives, but it's so scary. Teenagers, and then all these forces they don't understand. The fact that there's war coming, all these things, they don't even know what they're doing. And yet, they're already playing the game. Already, Carmen wants to be a captain herself. Already, Carmen is the reason that Johnny Rico joins the force, right? Already, they're all parts of this machine. You never really lose sympathy for them. You want them to succeed, you don't want them to die, but yet they do die. You want them to be happy. And at the same time, they're doing their part in trying to destroy the beings on a planet which is literally like on the other side of everything. So from such a distance, these primitive thoughts are somehow posing this existential threat to humanity.
You've got to want to